Well, it's finally happening. The return to normal has begun. As the country starts to open back up, are you taking the right steps to prepare yourself, both mentally and financially, for what may lie ahead? It's that time again, time to tune out the hype and focus on the facts. Facts that matter to you, the income generation. Let's get started. Get ready to separate reality from myth.
Joining me right now is Sound Income Strategies founder and CEO David Scranton.
They've created a new type of inflation, and although markets have always been an emotional place, they seem to be even more of an emotional place these days.
Jeffrey Small, market watcher, is with me.
Stock market dynamic is getting ready to significantly change.
So let's bring in our co-host, Jeff Small, president of Arbor Financial Services, and also the brand ambassador for the Retirement Income Store. I'm David Scranton. Now, if you're a regular viewer, you know I always stress that a successful retirement is about achieving and maintaining not just good financial health, but also good physical, mental, and emotional health also. Think about it, they're really all related. And for 2 long months, they've all been under siege by the COVID-19 pandemic. The social distancing measures required to contain the disease have resulted in economic stoppage that will, to some extent, affect the retirement plans of every American. For millions, the crisis has also increased feelings of anxiety and feelings of depression. Think about it, the disruption of our normal routines, the sense of isolation and uncertainty, these are serious issues. With the spread of the virus slowing and the economy starting to gradually open back up again, it's tempting to want to just breathe a sigh of relief and to believe that these issues are finally behind us, or at least will be in the extreme near future. But there's a real danger in that. As many have pointed out, the reopening will not be as easy as flipping a switch. And there may be setbacks along the way. If you're not mentally prepared for them, or for the new normal that is likely to emerge after the pandemic, you could be in for a rude awakening. And here's the good news. There's still time to prepare, just as there's still time to prepare and modernize your financial plan for the new corona economy. We'll talk about how to do both of these things on today's show. And of course, joining us again will be co-host Jeff Small, along with special guest Laurence Kotlikoff. He's an economics professor at Boston University, as well as a best-selling author. And once again this week, we're giving you the opportunity to join the conversation. At any point, you can submit your own questions or comments via phone message, text, or email, and we'll respond to your input later in the show. But before we bring out Jeff, let's talk a little bit more about why taking steps to maintain good mental and emotional health in the wake of this crisis is still so important. Don't let your guard down yet. You know that anyone could run at full speed for 50 or 100 yards or so, but you can't sprint for an entire marathon. You have to pace yourself. And by the same token, you can deal with a certain amount of mental and emotional stress and anguish if you know that you only have to do it for a certain period of time. In this case, 4 to 8 weeks was what everyone was guesstimating back in March. If, however, you reach the end of that period and you discover that now, after you've already let your guard down, instead you have to endure that stress for much longer, that is very difficult for many people. One of the things that has helped many people get through the coronavirus lockdown is knowing that it likely wouldn't last more than 4 to 8 weeks. Now that the economy is opening back up again, people are relieved that all the mental and emotional stress and anxiety is going to soon be behind them, as everyone's eager to get back to your old routines. And you know, that's understandable. But as we discussed, this process will take time. And there are likely to be setbacks along the way. If we push too hard too fast, COVID-19 could come back with a vengeance, just as cancer often does after a patient has been in remission and then comes out of remission the second time. Here's the point. If you're not mentally prepared for that possibility, if you've been sprinting these past 8 weeks instead of pacing yourself, just kind of, chewing on glass saying, we're going to get through this is terrible, but I'm going to muscle my way through it. It's time to slow down again and get yourself mentally prepared. Basically, that means taking care of yourself, finding healthy outlets, accepting the fact that social distancing is likely to be with us for a while to some degree, or may come back in full force if the virus comes back in full force? Here's the good news. The steps you take now to maintain good mental and emotional health will pay dividends in the future, whatever the future may hold. We'll talk more about that later, and we'll also share some specific tips on things that you can do to stay focused, to stay healthy, and to stay mentally prepared. In other words, to pace yourself. For starters, remember that mental, emotional, and physical health are all closely related. In other words, there has never been a better time to do all the smart things that your mother probably told you to do. Get a good night's sleep, eat your vegetables, and turn off that darn TV, right? Not only can too much TV during this time be unhealthy physically, but if you're watching too much news, it can also be mentally unhealthy. Too much negative news can be depressing, and positive news can lead to false hopes. Turning off the tube allows you to shift your focus to the here and now, to appreciate the things for which you're still grateful during these difficult times. And this is important. In fact, there may even be new things in your life you're grateful for that are a result of this crisis. We'll talk more about what some of those things might be coming up in just a bit. Now it's time to welcome our co-host, Jeff Small, founder of Arbor Financial Services, a retirement income store located in Melbourne, Florida. Jeff is also the author of the Amazon best-selling book, Turning Financial Planning Right Side Up. So Jeff, you know, you're usually a pretty positive, optimistic, cheerful guy, so it might be easier for you at a time like this than the rest of us. But, you know, what are some of the things that you have found have helped you stay just mentally more positive, even as you turn on the news and you hear lots of negativity?
Well, Dave, not watching the news is number one, because I've had a lot of clients tell me, and I'm sure our listeners and our watchers can relate to this, our viewers can relate to this, that they feel better when they actually don't watch the news. And so, but besides that, I was kind of being funny there. Besides that, I think prayer has really helped. Praying for your family, praying for what's happening with the pandemic, praying for a solution, and things will get better over time, and we will get through this. But you know, we've also made some epiphanies in some other areas, and I'm sure before I tell you any more, what have you gone through?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I agree with the prayer 100% because it really brings back faith. You know, my favorite F word, faith. Because if you think about it, once you remind yourself, which happen, you can't pray without that. You remind yourself of all the reasons that you have faith. All of a sudden, you become much calmer because you realize, the world's not going to end. Everything's going to be okay. But I think the most important thing is that people can sprint, and you can look ahead and you could say, I can grit it out for 6 weeks. It's probably only going to be 6 or 8 weeks, and you grit it out. But then, if all of a sudden you think it's going to be over because you get too positive, too euphoric, if you will, and maybe not realistic enough, and you let your guard down, now if it goes on for even 2 more weeks, those last 2 weeks are more painful, more miserable than the first 6 weeks were, because you're tense, you're prepared mentally, emotionally for those 6 weeks, but you weren't prepared for the negative outcome beyond that. So I think it's important to be focusing on the positives, but also I've found that by thinking about all those things, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, that I'm grateful for. If you think about what you're grateful for, then it's easy that if this takes a little longer and we don't recover from it as quickly as everybody thinks, then it's easier to stay positive and in a good state during that time.
Sure, and being grateful is synonymous with developing humility. And one thing that's happened is we all kind of took a punch in the gut on this one. We really did, because our lifestyles completely got upended. So we had to learn to adapt. But we will get through this. We will overcome this. It will take some time. But everything begins in faith. You're exactly right.
Yeah, it's funny, they all say, we make our plans and God laughs, right? Well, that's what's happening right now. We made plans, business plans, personal plans for the rest of the year. Heck, you and I in another week are supposed to be together with a big group of our retirement income store franchisees having a meeting, and now it's all virtual. So what I'd like to say, though, I think to our income generation viewers and listeners, is that all has to do with state. So at the risk of sounding a little Tony Robbins-ish for the moment, I'd like to say that it's all about the state that we're in. And in order to be in a positive mental state, you've got to be well rested. If you're not well rested, if you're tired, it's easy to get negative, it's easy to be cranky, it's easy to be miserable. So to be in that state, you've got to get the proper amount of rest. You've got to eat well, as we've talked about. You have to do your exercise, and hopefully now people have more time to exercise, so they're actually doing it. And when you focus on those things and you're in a good, positive state and frame of mind, your mind's kind of like Teflon. You can bounce a lot of the negative stuff away from it. Because at the end of the day, if you're focusing on the things for which you're grateful, and all of a sudden you fall in this vicious cycle where you start thinking about the negative stuff going on, maybe you get a little anxiety. Well, now if you've already thought about the things for which you're grateful, and if you're in a good physical and mental state, now basically it's like taking one DVD out of the back of your brain of all the negative stuff and putting in the positive DVD, playing a better movie, which immediately, like boom, a snap of a finger, it puts you in a good mood. And to me, that's really the key, being in a good state physically, mentally, and having that positive DVD that you can use to replace the negative one.
Yeah, those are all really great points, Dave. I think this being self-quarantining has really taught us to be creative. I was walking down the street the other day, and my neighbors were outside walking. A group of them were, and they're like, "Hey, we want to have a social distancing party. We're gonna do it in the sidewalk or in the street, so to speak." And so people are still looking for that human connection to be able to maintain a level of safety, but yet keep that human connection up. And it's that type of creativity that will get us through this, along with everything else that we've discussed.
Have you done a FaceTime happy hour yet?
I have not done a FaceTime happy hour yet.
What are you doing at 5 o'clock tonight? Let's make it a date. FaceTime happy hour. Those are actually pretty fun. I've been part of a couple of those. Pretty interesting. Stay with us. We'll be back with more here in a moment on the income generation. And yes, we'll be talking about FaceTime happy hours right after the break. We'll be right back.
Investing for income? The idea has grown in popularity over the last several years due to today's volatile stock market. But if you're at or near retirement age, it's no longer just how much you've saved, it's about maximizing and protecting your life savings while minimizing your risk from market ups and downs. David J. Scranton's new book, The Retirement Income Story, is here to help baby boomers face the challenges of investing in this age of economic uncertainty. Visit theretirementincomestory.com to learn more.
As you tune out the negative and focus on the positives in your life, you may just realize there are some things that you're grateful for that were actually brought about by the coronavirus pandemic. For example, I have a good friend whose daughter and son-in-law, along with their children, temporarily moved back in with him and his wife because they'd sold their home and they were shopping for a new house. And this was just before the lockdown began. Needless to say, after the lockdown started, his first thought was, oh my goodness, what did I do? Now we're all stuck together. However, a situation that he thought would be a burden turned out to be a blessing. In fact, he recently shared with me that he loves reconnecting with his daughter and getting to know his grandchildren even better than ever before. He's actually in an exempt business where he goes to work a little bit during the day, but he can't wait to get home. He gets home as early as possible to do with this. And this probably wouldn't have happened without the crisis. So he's grateful for it. And that's just one example. Others have been forced to master new technologies that have helped them actually become more connected with friends and family members or made them more efficient or productive at work. These skills will, I believe, very likely continue to be valuable in the new norm that emerges as the pandemic continues. Here's the point. For many people, it's another positive that they can focus on during this time that's filled with a lot of negative news. Another positive has been the opportunity to reorganize things in their homes and in their lives, and to tackle projects that they may have been putting off for years now. For some, that's included revisiting their financial plan, or at least I like to think so, and taking steps to modernize it for the new Corona economy. And that's a really good idea. Why? Because as we've said, the coronavirus crisis will ultimately impact the retirement of virtually every single American in some way, shape, or form. And that's why this $2 trillion coronavirus relief bill created by Congress included several provisions that are aimed directly at retirement planning. And we discussed these things on last week's show. Moreover, there are more and more efforts that I believe are going to be on the way at the federal level, which makes now a perfect time to revisit your own retirement strategy if you haven't already done so. Changes to your plan might be prudent or even necessary in order to meet your retirement income needs, and frankly, to help protect your money from the potential of another major market downturn. We'll be talking about this coming up in just a few moments. Right now, let's welcome back co-host Jeff Small and also our special guest, Laurence Kotlikoff, economics professor at Boston University and also a best-selling author. Laurence, thanks for being here with us today.
A great pleasure. Nice to be with both of you.
Now, every time I've had you on, I've always picked your brains on Social Security because, as I like to say, you're the guy who actually literally wrote the book on Social Security. But you know what? Today we have more important fish to fry. I want to pick your economics brain about what is going on. How bad do you think this economic fall off is really going to be when all is said and done and it goes in the history books?
I think we're looking at the greatest depression, not the Great Depression, but the greatest depression. We're going to have output drop probably 40% this quarter. That's in 3 months, output will have declined by 40%. In the Great Depression, it took 3 years for output to decline by 26%. So this is a much bigger magnitude problem than the Great Depression. And all the problems of restarting the economy after the economy bottomed out back then are going to reemerge now. But even in spades, because people are going to be very afraid, unless we do some real collective group testing, and I can talk about that in a second, they're going to be very afraid to get back into restaurants and shopping and so forth.
Yeah, I know. I've been afraid to even go and get takeout because I don't trust all this, quote, touchless delivery stuff. How about unemployment? We're over 20% right now on unemployment. We were at 25 during the Great Depression. Do you think unemployment's going to surpass that 25% also?
Oh, absolutely. We have about 30% of the workforce that can work from home. Maybe that's been up to 40%, but so we're talking about probably 40% at least, or 50% of the workforce not being able to really function. So we need to get the economy back rolling, but there's a very clever way to do this, and I can explain to you if you have a moment.
Sure. Do you hear that, Jeff?
I do. I'm curious to see what he has to say about how do we synchronize the economic recovery, because it's really an unsynchronized event since we're dealing with data that we don't have yet, and we're in this unknown territory. So, Laurence, if you could shed some light on that, I'm waiting with breathless anticipation.
I will do, Jeff. So here's an idea. It goes back to what scientists have been doing with testing going back to the 40s. And it was actually developed, this technique was developed by an economist named Robert Dorfman, professor of mine, when I was in grad school. So the idea is this: you take the something like 60 or so households, you swab them, and you put all their swabs together in one test tube. I'm telling you this heuristically. So you test 62 households with one test. And if that test comes back negative, then you know that all 62 households, which might be 120 or so people, are negative, and you can give them a green wristband and send them back into the economy. They'll wear that band for the week. That's the color of the week. Next week it turns brown. So next week they have to go back and get a brown wristband, be retested. All voluntary. And you economize dramatically on testing. And the way the protocol works is that when we're testing 62 households together, we're doing it in a very clever way so that we can actually identify which households are positive. And those households are quarantined. So the idea is to capture, contain the virus, free everybody who's healthy, capture, lock down the people that are sick. And now over time, you basically will kill the virus. So go on to the offensive against the virus. This is called group testing, batch testing. It again started with Robert Dorfman in the 40s. They do it for blood banks all the time. This is nothing new. My brother's provost at Cornell did this group testing, PCR group testing, the swabbing. He was swabbing the noses of mice. And he group tested 40,000 mice. I think it took him 150 tests rather than 40,000 tests. So if we can get up from 2 million a week, where we currently are, to 6 million a week test, and we do this intelligently, not the way the people in the White House are conceiving it, or any of the governors, but actually intelligently, we can get everybody in the country tested every week and get this thing behind us in 4 weeks. We will have 96% of the households freed. There are columns on my website, Kotlikoff.net. I'm going to put another one up today or tomorrow about group testing. And this has been tested. The actual protocol has been tested, or the testing of groups has been tested in a very careful study in Israel.
So I get the technology, Laurence, but 40 seconds left. Is that realistic in our country? Heck, when this total quarantine occurred, we didn't lock anybody down. So in order to do that, wouldn't we have to take a more draconian measure and literally say to those households that test positive, it is illegal for you to leave your home, you cannot leave? And if so, will we ever do that?
If you don't have a green wristband, the stores can say, please don't come into the store unless you have a green wristband. So the whole thing becomes voluntary. I want to be tested so I can go to work. I want to be tested so I can go to class. I want to be tested to go shopping or to the restaurant. And then I know that when I go into a restaurant with my green band and I see everybody else there with their green band, I know it's safe. And I know the waiters have green bands. Then you're in a different world. Now you've contained and you're able to kill the virus.
Well, the whole idea behind that is to bring the consumer back and give them an element of safety, so they can walk into that store, so they can be a consumer again.
The doctors in the White House, it seems like Fauci and Bricks, have no real concept here of economics and what's going to be needed to really get the economy rolling again. And that is exactly what you just said, Jeff, which is confidence that people will know that it's safe to go and shop, go into a restaurant.
So bottom line, 20 seconds left. You believe that it can work even without the legal reinforcement here in our great country, the land of the free and home of the brave?
I think make it voluntary, give them the band, and then it will naturally take off by itself. And you have them tested in CVS and Walmart's, or the National Guard have a testing booth down the street. Yep. There's a zillion ways to do this. You just need some leadership.
Laurence, thanks so much for being part of the show once again. We really appreciate it. And you stay with us too. We have much more coming up. FaceTime, Zoom, Skype, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, the list goes on. Many Americans were familiar with these tools before the coronavirus crisis, but more have become familiar with them in the last 2 months. With these social distancing standards and having to keep friends, family, and entire workplaces apart, they've actually become vital tools for staying connected, both professionally, but more importantly in many ways, socially. Odds are you've been doing a lot of Zooming and FaceTiming. But if not, be aware that the technology is more user-friendly than ever before, and that taking advantage of it can be a great way to help you maintain good mental and emotional health. That's true even now that the economy is starting to reopen, because again, that process is going to take time. Odds are that your ability to reconnect personally with many people will continue to be limited in some way, shape, or form for a while to come, which means doing more business and more socializing over the internet is likely to be part of the new normal. So don't resist it, embrace it, and be grateful for it. Heck, your grandchildren already know how to do it. They do it all the time. And once you do also, there'll be many other ways that you can use it to stay connected and to stay mentally healthy. For example, you can schedule group visits with friends and family members at specific times. You can throw a virtual birthday party, have a book club meeting, or host an online open mic. The possibilities are endless, and scheduling a specific time for your get-together gives you something positive to actually look forward to. You can also play your favorite games in real time with fellow gamers online. And I don't necessarily mean the games that the kids play, but websites like Arcadium.com offer a variety of card and board games that you can play with others or on your own. You can also download numerous game-playing apps to your phone. And finally, you can attend live concerts online. You know, music for many is an important source of strength and an important source of connectivity. Knowing this, many artists, groups, and orchestras have been hosting live broadcasts of full-length concerts, sometimes for free. Here's the bottom line. With the world more connected than ever through technology, there's never been a better time to embrace that technology to stay connected yourself. Now let's bring back co-host Jeff Small. Jeff, I got to tell you, I'm kicking myself because we forgot to invite Laurence Kotlikoff to our happy hour tonight at 5 o'clock with FaceTime. We forgot. The poor guy's going to feel left out. Do you want to call him after the break, or do you want me to call him? One of us has to invite him.
Well, he needs to be part of that because he's so dynamic. He's super brilliant. He's got lots of insight. And I think he really keyed on something that was important about how we can resolve these issues. Because as we look through the threat dynamic, Dave, and you and I are constantly covering what is the threat dynamic to the viewership, the listenership of the income generation with their money. And I think the biggest threat that Laurence had talked about was the consumer may not show up. And I see that as the biggest threat going forward, because what we have found so far is that even in China, who seems to be far advanced in recovery, at least they say so, the consumer is not showing up in China. They're still afraid to leave their houses. And so that if that happens here, it's not going to be good numbers for the economy.
Well, you're right. I mean, I guess what's interesting about this, if it works without absolute legal enforcement, in other words, if we can get all the establishments to enforce it, which would have to be done logistically, it's great, because you're right. It does make the consumer more confident. If they look around the restaurant, they see all green wristbands, so that's pretty neat. But also if the people with the brown wristbands, the wristbands that say, hey, he tested positive, are not allowed in, now they're probably not going to be walking around in circles in public. They'll probably be staying at home even more voluntarily. And it's kind of like, their brown wristband, if you will, be kind of like the scarlet letter, where they don't want to be seen in public with that. And if you get seen in public without a wristband, it's probably just as bad as not having either the green or the brown. So maybe it can guilt people. Maybe it can guilt them into, kind of following the guidelines and making sure that they do the right things. Kind of a neat idea. Do you think it's enforceable? Do you think it's doable? Do you think it's an idea the administration would consider?
I do not think it's an idea that the administration or Dr. Fauci or Dr. Birx would consider at this time, unless we saw a second wave of the virus and the second wave of infections was higher in terms of the total number of infections than the one we're going through now, because the numbers are trending down. And as long as they keep trending, there's not going to be a need for batch testing in the administration's eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there is going to be another wave. There has to be. There's always an uptick with this stuff. Now, if we make it through the summer and we don't get an uptick because the virus doesn't do as well in a warm climate and it starts in the fall, I think eventually we're going to get that, which is why, I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but the reality is that, I'm from the Northeast, as you know, Jeff, and I've driven from Connecticut to Florida on many occasions, and it's deceiving. You get your face fixed around a drive that goes through 10 or 12 different states, and you're ready for it. It's going to be painful. It's not going to be fun, and you go ahead and do it. But then you hit the last state. You hit Florida, and you're ecstatic because now you're like, yes, I'm through 9 or 10 states. I'm on our last state. We're almost there. But Jeff, you know how long the state of Florida is, right? So reality is when you hit the border of Florida, if you're coming down to where I live, you still have a third of the trip to go coming from the Northeast. So unfortunately, what happens mentally and emotionally, and I've lived this many times making this trip, is you let your guard down when you see Welcome to Florida, right? And you think, this is wonderful. We're almost there. You let your guard down, and an hour later, you're absolutely miserable because, you do indeed have, still 7 or 8 hours left to drive. So that's my big concern. And so, with that, what else? What else have you found that has helped you or has helped your clients or has helped family members, loved ones, stay positive at a time like this?
Well, a lot of different things. The social connection is one of the biggest ones. Using the phone, using the text, using FaceTime, learning how to use Zoom videos or video conferencing for our doctor's visits or whatever business we need to conduct online. Because let's face it, Dave, doctors aren't seeing people on a regular basis. They're only doing teledoc visits right now. Or for patients that they are seeing, they're only seeing folks that are there necessarily that have to see the doctor. And so it's on a as-seen basis. And so we have to evolve. And it's been grueling. It has not been fun going through this. I mean, yesterday I had my very first social distancing client visit where we both had masks on. We both maintained a specific level of distance. And the good report is that it went really, really well. But when I suggested it to the customer to come in, they were ecstatic. They were absolutely ecstatic, could not wait to come in, were very happy to wear a mask and comply with being safe. And I think that's where we're going to evolve to as we all want to migrate from being stuck at home all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because people want the human interaction, even professionally, people want to do business. They can sit across the table from, they can look eye to eye. And of course, you can do it with Skype, and for most people, 90% of the population, that's fine, but there are some people who insist on that face-to-face. But I have to tell you, what you mentioned about telemedicine, I am really excited about, because think about this. Think about the prospects of not having to sit in a doctor's office now for 45 minutes while everyone else is rolling in, coughing, choking, sneezing. Imagine that all of a sudden the doctor is ready to see you and boom, you're there and you're ready to go. I hope that lasts, don't you?
Oh, there's no doubt. Nobody likes to go to the doctor's office because as soon as they have an appointment, they're wondering what they're going to catch while they're at the doctor's office. So being able to talk to the doctor on your computer at home is a lot easier, than being exposed to all the germs and viruses that you're going to potentially be exposed to at visiting a medical professional in their office. I completely agree with that.
Yeah, so there's a lot of good things, and hopefully those good things will last. So, and one thing that's going to last is we have more of the show coming up. We're not done yet. So stay with us through the commercial break. We'll be right back here on the Income Generation in just a moment.
Visit theRetirementIncomeStore.com today to find out how you can rescue your retirement.
For behind-the-scenes photos, retirement planning tips, and upcoming giveaways, follow the Income Generation Show on Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch video clips, guest interviews, and to catch up on past episodes.
Just last week, I noted that compared to March, the financial markets were relatively calm throughout most of April as the pandemic curve began to flatten. I also noted that while some analysts are already saying the worst is over for the stock market, I still believe we have another shoe to drop. As I explained, rather than the V or U-shaped recovery some experts are forecasting, I think a W-shaped recovery is actually more likely. And that means the almost 30% drop we saw in March is likely to be repeated or possibly even surpassed at least once before the slow long-term market recovery begins. With unemployment and estimated GDP shrinkage already at historic highs, I believe Wall Street still has a lot of pain in store before stock values once again accurately reflect the magnitude, the economic magnitude of this crisis, and lots of analysts agree. A base case scenario for the coming months, published by economists at Rosenberg Research, goes like this. The economy reopens, as it is starting to now, throughout May. and a staggered approach across industries and across regions. However, there are periodic setbacks in terms of COVID-19 case counts, as we've just discussed. Those are enough to make people less comfortable and less confident about spending as they did prior to the crisis. A vaccine is not yet developed, but treatments are improved. What does this base case mean for the economy and financial markets? Well, according to this report, it means at least a 30% contraction in real GDP in the second quarter, negative year-over-year consumer price growth for 5 quarters, and unemployment rate of 14.2% by the end of 2020. It's actually higher now, so getting better, but still not great by the end of 2020, and averaging still 13% throughout 2021. For the stock market, the report also says that likely means another drop of at least 30% in the coming months, and valuations roughly 10% lower than they are today for at least the next year, year and a half. Again, this is just a base case forecast, which means a most likely scenario based upon all the data in their relevant research. The report also offered a worst case scenario in which deflation takes hold. The Fed basically becomes powerless, and the fallout for the stock market is much worse. Frankly, there are certain aspects of the worst case scenario that actually make some sense to me. Either way, I firmly believe that taking action now to reduce your market risk while there's still time is a crucial part of maintaining good financial health and for preparing yourself financially, mentally, and emotionally for this new Corona economy. Now it's time to bring back co-host Jeff Small. Now, Jeff, I want to keep it positive here because we're talking about all the positive things to focus on, but I think it's also important that we continue to educate our viewers, our listeners, and that everybody knows that there are things they can do to prepare and take action. And that worst case scenario in the Rosenberg report really alluded to some of those things. And it's not that far-fetched. And you heard Laurence Kotlikoff talk about it when he talked about unemployment that could be worse than the Great Depression, GDP loss that could be worse than the Great Depression just next quarter. He called it the greatest depression. So we do have a duty to make sure our viewers and listeners know the reality of it. And at today's higher market levels, after this partial, we call it dead cat bounce in the market, they can actually take advantage of this stuff and they can actually protect themselves now, right?
Yeah, they can. I mean, the market valuations right now are a gift with what's going to happen in the future economic data. It doesn't match up with what's going to happen from a growth perspective like we had the last 10 years. It's going to be the opposite. Actually, before the pandemic, Dave, the projection on the markets for the next 10 years, the rates of return from some of the smartest minds, from Warren Buffett to Robert Shiller, were not that great. The numbers were pretty close to zero because we knew there was going to be a correction anyway. We just didn't know there was going to be a pandemic. So you've got to be a financial realist. Even people that have no background in economics can understand this has the potential to be worse than the Great Depression from an employment perspective. And if it's going to be worse than the Great Depression, we know there's going to be massive or limited company failures. Companies aren't going to make it. The Fed's only going to bail out industries that are essential, and municipalities that are essential, and states that are essential. Well, they're all essential. But needless to say, they're going to bail people out this time like we did in the Great Depression to get us through this until we can get back into a growth side of the equation. And that's not going to happen until the virus is gone. And nobody knows when that's going to happen.
But Jeff, for what our viewers and listeners need to know now, do you agree with me that most likely that we've recovered 2/3 of the losses that came so quick and went away so quick? Do you agree that most likely this is a good opportunity for our income generation members to de-risk and to take some of that money off the table now they've made a 2/3 recovery?
It is the best opportunity because from here the economic data gets worse. It gets worse. GDP gets worse. Earnings gets worse. Unemployment gets worse. And that is all going to drag down the market like a heavy anchor that a boat can't lift up. And it's going to put your money below the waterline of where we are today.
I agree. Well, we take another commercial break. When we get back, I want to get off the financial stuff. I want to talk about the positives. I want to talk about virtual karaoke and some other nice stuff coming up right after the break. Again, some positives that have come out of this incredibly terrible pandemic. So stay with us. We have much more to come right after the break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Income Generation. I'm David Scranton. I'm here with Jeff Small. So Jeff, virtual karaoke. I didn't tell you this. One of the things I'm thinking of coming up in the next week or so when we have our virtual conference for all the Retirement Income Store franchisees is actually do, we can't do our dinner events, we can't do our awards banquets, we can't do all that fun stuff we normally do. But I was thinking about continuing the tradition of karaoke, virtual karaoke. What do you think?
I think that's great if you have a nice voice, but in your case, Dave, that speakers on the computer might break.
Well, that's why usually you remember after the first year they precluded me from doing karaoke. So now I just get the MC and get to push the buttons. I don't get to sing anymore. But you do okay. Are you in the mood to belt out a tune right now? Or are you feeling up to speed? Or are your vocal cords feeling okay, or not really?
My voice is worse than yours, so I'll spare our viewers and our listeners that pain at this time.
I have a good friend, may he rest in peace, who is in the financial industry, great karaoke singer, great voice, and he said his name was David also, and he said he encouraged me to come up and do the old Don McLean American Pie, and I told him, I said, look, David, I will make you go flat. He goes, nah, you won't make me go flat. We finished the song. He looked at me, he said, I can't believe it. You actually made me go flat, and it did happen. So, but listen, bottom line is this. I want to make sure that everybody is focusing on the positives, but I want to make sure that you, our beloved viewers, our beloved listeners, although you're excited about reopening and being able to go back to restaurants, being able to go back to do things, make sure that you're also, thinking of what could happen in a worst-case scenario. They always say, what's the old saying, Jeff? Plan for the worst and expect the best, or something like that.
Sure.
Well, I think that's a good thing right now. If you plan for the worst, that we might go back into quarantine, but it doesn't happen, at least your guard will be up, and it won't be like that drive from Connecticut to Florida where that last 300-400 miles is grueling.
Yeah, that last leg is grueling. And Dave, we all have trauma from going to the grocery store and looking at the toilet paper shelf and not seeing any. But the good news is Charmin has increased their toilet paper output to accommodate anybody's future needs going forward, and they estimate no more short supplies.
As usual, the bearer of useless information. Thank you very much for that, Jeff. I get traumatized just trying to go to a grocery store wearing gloves and wearing a mask, and then you end up touching your money, your credit card with the gloves anyway, so I'm really not sure what it does at the end of the day. I think we're all just kidding ourselves with some of this stuff. But anyway, stay with us. We have more coming up here on The Income Generation. We'll be right back in a moment. I'm David Scranton, and we're here with Jeff Small. We'll be right back. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us today for another episode of The Income Generation. Of course, I'd also like to thank you, our new and returning viewers. Based on early numbers, I had forecast that the U.S. would surpass 1 million coronavirus cases by the end of April. And sadly, that happened. I also pointed out that the virus would be difficult to contain here in the United States because many Americans would be reluctant to follow social distancing guidelines. As I said before, we are the land of the free and the home of the brave. After all, and we're not used to having our government infringe on our freedoms to this great extent. Fortunately, it didn't take long for a majority of Americans to understand that we were in a very unique and a very dangerous situation, and that sacrificing some of our freedoms was actually the best way to deal with the danger and to get it under control. But as we've discussed, today it hasn't been easy, and it isn't over yet. Even as the country starts to gradually open back up again, the economic damage and the psychological scars left by the coronavirus crisis will likely take a long time to heal. And there are likely to be setbacks. But once we accept and we understand that, we can use it as motivation to take steps to adjust mentally, emotionally, and financially to the new normal. So start adjusting now. Maintain good physical health, good mental health, good emotional health. How? By exercising, eating well, making sure you're getting your rest, by tuning out to the negative as much as humanly possible and focusing on the things for which you're grateful. Stay active. stay connected, stay engaged, embrace new technologies that allow you to do so. And finally, of course, maintain good financial health by paying attention to the markets, by understanding all your options, and of course, last but not least, modernizing your retirement plan for the new Corona economy. Thanks for watching. If you're close to retirement and you really want to know how to protect and maximize your money, it's essential that you stay informed and up to date. And as you know, right here is where you can do it on the Income Generation. I'm David Scranton, and we'll see you next week. Financial experts have predicted that the next major recession could happen as early as this year. What would you do if it took half of your retirement savings with it? I'm David Scranton, founder of Sound Income Strategies. And there is a safer way, investing for income. By focusing primarily on non-stock market income-generating investments, you could significantly reduce the impacts of the next major recession. Visit the Retirement Income Store at soundincomestrategies.com to connect with an income specialist who can help you get started to an income-based retirement plan.